how you go from being a comfortable, I mean, you had been an associate at a law firm, then you had your own law firm where you were a partner, and then all of a sudden you decide to go to Sudan. Like, where the heck does that come from?
Yeah, that's what my family and my law partners asked me.
Yeah, what the hell are you thinking, man?
Where are you going? Yeah. Well, something drew me to it, Brian. I mean, I had, much like you, we have lots of friends, either in the Corps or even outside the Corps and A&M, that served overseas, either in Afghanistan or Iraq. I didn't take that track. But being around Fort Hood, and especially in my private practice, I had a lot of clients and had a lot of interaction with Fort Hood. That time for Central Texas was very challenging, with as many deployments and the dynamics and how it was affecting not only
and give us the time frame.
Sure. So this is from 2000. Really from 2001 to 2010, I would say. Lots of significant challenges for Central Texas, with as many and repeated deployments that our soldiers had. And obviously, we're going to hear and know a lot about the stresses and things that caused on them. But having been here and see the impact it had on their families, on their wives, on their children, on their parents, I always had I had a desire in my heart to want to serve in some way in my capacity. I wasn't, I'm not as physical, as athletic as Blake was, or as crazy as Blake was, to sign up and go lead Marine platoons into Fallujah. But I wanted to find my own way to contribute. And so I had some relationships and some connections with some folks from Bell County, which is right next to us, that work on Fort Hood. Had an attorney friend that actually was assigned to go and work in a lot of the same way I did in Sudan and Afghanistan. And this was in 2006. And so they reached out to me and asked if I would be interested. And a lot of it is just civil society, rule of law initiatives that the Justice Department would initiate to create more stable areas. And the whole philosophy is, if you can stabilize communities, stabilize areas, you can stabilize regions, and then eventually you can stabilize a country with consistency and predictability in their lawmaking and their law applications. And so I had a good friend of mine. She went to Kabul in Afghanistan, and they were recruiting people to go do the same thing there. And they called me and asked if I'd be interested. And my wife hit the stop button very quick on going to Afghanistan and said, no, sir.
So you're married. You're married at the time.
Oh, I'm married at the time with
any kids?
6-month-old little girl.
Wow.
And so that was a whole nother curveball outside of just, generally my family, and my law practice and my partners at the time. But I turned that one down and I said, look, I really appreciate it, but right now my family was really not comfortable with me being in Afghanistan in 2006 and 2007.
Yeah.
And I said, but keep me on the list. If you have any other assignments that you would like to consider me for, I'm game. Well, and it didn't take 60 days before I got another call saying, well, how about going to the Sudan? And I'm like, the only thing I know about the Sudan is Darfur.
Yeah.
And the incredible tragedies and genocide that I would see and read about on the news. But the more I researched it, the more it really touched my heart to want to go help these people. And quite frankly, the news, Americans weren't getting as targeted because there's not very many Americans in Sudan. I mean, we haven't had an embassy in Sudan in forever since I believe our ambassador was murdered there in 1972.
Yeah.
We've had a limited political presence there. Of course, Bill Clinton, we launched cruise missiles into Khartoum in 1997.
Was that when we hit was it a pharmaceutical plant?
Pharmaceutical plant. I've been there. I've been there and actually walked through it's in the same condition it was probably the 2 days after we bombed it.
Really?
It was something I really wanted to go see and feel and touch and experience. But as I researched it, it was really a place, and talking with my wife and my family, that they were comfortable with me going there because, quite frankly, Americans just weren't as targeted. And I would be with an international contingency, much like there was in Afghanistan. But that was really the genesis or the start of that. Was I had a friend doing it in Afghanistan, and that led to me being referred. And so I took a little sabbatical, and in January of 2007, I left for Washington, D.C., I spent 2 weeks in Fredericksburg, Virginia, at a place called the Crucible, which is nothing more than training and preparing folks to go in country.
Yep.
Anything from psychological testing, physical testing, basic geopolitical instruction and education, self-defense. We did everything from that to fab fires. So they would present us with any type of weapon that we might come across. Should we have to use it, we would be familiar on how to do it. Of course, this country boy had a blast doing that.
Yeah. You probably knew how to operate about 90% of the weapons.
Oh, absolutely. I just kept thinking my dad, if he was here, he'd just be in heaven, getting to shoot and operate all these different weapons. And then even to go so far to teach us how to drive out in the country and things like that, because we were going to be in some rough area.
Probably a lot of teaching too on just the culture and how to handle things, and all different cultures. We sometimes Americans, I think, have this notion that the ugly American notion that we don't really feel as obligated to learn about other cultures when we're over there. So it's very, very good. I think shows a lot of respect to the culture when you've learned about it. And so when you go over there, you're respectful of the other cultures, right?
Oh, absolutely. And in part of that training up in Fredericksburg, they actually bused us into D.C. several times, and we had training at the State Department about geopolitical, cultural, tribal, everything you can dream of about Sudan from birth to death. Yeah. So we spent some days at the State Department and some other offices that knew the history of Sudan, the culture of Sudan, so that we were equipped as much as possible to at least at a minimum have an appreciation for what the things the folks there were dealing with.
Yeah. And so it really is interesting that, and I was talking to Blake, I talked to Colonel Flynn, Toby Flynn, who as well. I've also talked to another Marine Corps officer named Nick Kalt. But it's interesting to me that we have this whole group of friends, and you and I are right about the age group where we have a lot of friends that are like this, that graduated from college, went into the private workforce, and then 9/11 happened, and boom, they get in the military, or they're serving in some capacity. So very, very similar story for you. I'm sure you live in a comfortable life, making a comfortable living. You got a newborn kid, you're married, and all of a sudden you just uproot yourself and go to a place in Africa that is
Mars.
Not a first world country. No. And so there must be something. I'm really interested in this because I asked Colonel Flynn, I asked Officer Kalt, I asked Blake, I asked all these officers, like, there really has to be something drawing you to this, like some sort of real passion to uproot your comfortable life and leave your newborn daughter and go to Africa. So what do you think that was like fundamentally that really pulled you to this?
I think in one of your earlier podcasts with Blake Sawyer, I think he explained it real well. I think a lot of it is how you were brought up, with your family, and the type of programming that you get from your folks on love for country, love for people, love for service. Yeah. And so I think that's where it would at least start, is with how I was raised, and then a large part is being in the Corps of Cadets and just the understanding and appreciation for what service really does mean. Yeah. I mean, I love your podcast. I know it's lessons from leaders, but a lot of it is, I for this particular podcast, I'd rather prefer lessons from a servant, because that's what I am. I'm a servant. I'm the servant of my folks here in Corio County, and that's exactly what I was when I went to Sudan. So I think a lot of it came from my upbringing and how I was raised, and then just more components were added on and more ideas were added on while I was around those kind of people at A&M. In the Corps, that really had a passion to serve and help people and be dedicated to it. And I think all of us have that seed in us in some way, and it's just a matter of where you go to get water put on it. And I certainly did when I was a kid, and certainly did when I went to A&M. And so I think that's really kind of where it started for me.
Well, you were ahead of the curve, at least as far as I'm in relation to me, because I'm 47 now, and it really, Dusty, it wasn't until I was about 40 years old or so that I had this revelation that the world is not all about what you can do for yourself. It's not all about me. It's about what you do for other people. Like that, to me, is what a real legacy is all about. And you realize that a lot earlier than some of us did, including me. And so Dusty, you go to DC, you get some training, and then when do you end up going to Sudan?
Yeah, so go to DC, get some training, and then boom. I think I got in DC around January the 20th of 07. I think I flew out for Sudan on February the 3rd. So I left DC and we flew into Frankfurt, Germany, and then we got on a plane from Earth to Mars, is the way I like to tell people.
So what's going through your mind as you're making this? Are you nervous? I'm sure you're nervous. Yeah. Are you excited? I mean, what kind of emotions are going?
Okay, so well, it's really a mix of a lot of things. I'm really sad for leaving my wife and my young daughter. I'm nervous about that, leaving them here. And then really what was going through my mind is all the pictures and the reports that I had been reading and seeing about Sudan and about what I was about to walk into, knowing I was fixing to fly into Khartoum first, and Khartoum being a place that we had bombed in the late 90s, also a place where Osama bin Laden had lived. Before he left.
Which a lot of people don't realize that literally Osama bin Laden had physically been in Sudan for a period of time.
He lived in Khartoum. Yeah, actually not too far from where I would stay when I was in Khartoum. So I was really nervous about how I would be received. Also knowing we didn't have an embassy there, we have consulates and we have some diplomatic relationship, but really, I was getting into Sudan, and the Americans that were in Sudan were there with the UN tag on them.